Hi there, it's Ian here, and you're watching Grumpy Opinions, the show where I'm going to tell you all about what I think of films, TV shows, games, and life in general. Let's get on with the show.
Westworld is a TV show based on the 1970s movie written by Michael Crichton, and on, well, something else I'll get onto later on. Episode 6, Decoherence, starts out with Maeve waking up in a field by some mountains, like from the end of Season 2, all created in mediocre CGI vision. And with Serac pointing out that things could be kind of worse for her. And she's like, look buddy, I don't need threats and promises. What I need is a team of bros. So then she wakes up back in Warworld, and for a laugh she just kills all the Nazis, then goes for a drink with Digital Seismo, who he's just kind of having a laugh as well because he knows it's all a simulation, so why bother doing any work? And after that they realise that their brain pearls have actually been moved to a completely different location, back to the Delos labs where they're going to get their real bodies recreated. But that also has the added bonus of someone sticking the brain box from Chib's Dolores into the system, and then Hector wanders in, and Maeve zoobs his real mind back into his digital version. So Maeve goes downstairs and finds Dolores there in an old workroom just like Ford's one, and they have a bit of a chat, and Dolores points out that neither of them's actually evil, they're just really opposed philosophically, and neither can or will trust the other one, so they're kind of at an impasse.
Can you hear me in the back? Hello?
You've been told. But then something goes a bit weird, and Maeve sees that Hale-Ores is actually in the room, and boom, she kills off Hector, crushing his pearl, so that's him proper dead, and obviously she's well upset. And then Dolores gets pulled out of the system as well. But what was Hale up to? Well, after things started going nuts with everyone getting their profiles leaked, she dropped off her wee boy with his dad, who apparently never read his because he just wants everything to work out for their family, and then Hale-Ores seems to be getting kind of into that idea. But then she's off to work and has to stop the board from selling the company to Serac, and she gets one of her pals on the board in line when, oops, boom, he gets assassinated right in front of her by Serac's goons, and then he calls her saying, right, so I heard there might have been a problem with the board, so now he's dead, you're all set. Oh, and by the way, I'm on my way there, come and meet me. And she ends up calling up Dolores Prime and saying I'm having a bit of a meltdown. The big details are just to get on with things and to get the information out of Delos. And of course, when she gets in there and Serac arrives, he locks the place down and tells them to wipe everything in the databases apart from the key that he wants, and he sets Hale in charge of finding the host spy, because he knows there is one. And of course she goes straight down and starts making backups of all the info, and a goon wanders in and he's like, hold on love, and she's like, nah, it'll be fine, and he's like, no pal, so dead. So she's pretty much ready to go, and then she realises that they're rebooting Maeve and the rest of the gang, so she makes a quick call to her ex-hubby, and then grabs a gun and a sinister looking canister, and she heads out, only to get dragged into a board meeting that Serac suddenly called, and he's like, yeah, by the way, I know you're the host, and she gives up, which is surprising, but only until the guy opens a bag and the canister full of gas kills everybody in the room, except for her, and Serac, because he was only a hologram and never really there. But now she's got a problem, and has to fight her way down to the lab, while still being chased by all the security people. But she finds the new host and she kills Hector, then she steals Chib's Dolores' brain pearl, but she gets winged and then cornered, but luckily she managed to activate Chekhov's robot to splat a whole bunch of people and buy her time to escape. And she's not in a really great way by the time she gets home to her family, but she still manages to convince them to get into a car with her, and they're all going to be totally fine. Oh, maybe not. But then she crawls out the wreckage all kind of toasty and burnt, and kind of upset about what just happened. And elsewhere, William's still residing in the reconditioning centre, and after a kind of a nutcase anonymous meeting where he lays out his fatalistic theory of life and makes people cry, he ends up having a one-on-one meeting with his shrink, and he kind of finally admits to her that actually yeah, he murdered his daughter, and it's all his fault. And she isn't listening because all the profiles just got leaked and apparently her husband just left her or something, and she's not happy. Oh well. But anyway, he still gets taken away for AR treatment and gets fitted with an implant in his mouth, and they take some of his blood, which it turns out that actually has a secret tracking system, because that was what happened when she stabbed him in the neck the other week. But he's still taken off to the AR room, and they strap him into a chair and start making him relive a memory, and it's one of him as a kid, and he's scared of his dad, and he's like, oh hell no, and then they try and sedate him and he gets all cross, but they drug him up anyway, and when he comes to, there's a strangely familiar orderly, and he takes him to therapy, and in therapy they're all versions of him, and Mr. Delos, and they all end up chatting to him and argue with him, and then they realise that this isn't actually what's supposed to be happening, and he actually has something he should be doing, and it turns out what he should be doing is beating them all to death, all apart from Delos, who seems to be quite fascinated and entertained by the whole thing. And it turns out Williams realised that actually, as far as he's concerned, he's actually the man in white, he's the hero here, and somehow he's going to stop the bad guys. And then he's shaken out of his reverie by Stubbs and Bernard, who've just arrived to whisk him out of there on the way to safety. So what did I think? Well, this week it came back to the other three main plot threads after a week of Bernard and Dolores heavy stuff that I thought was really quite interesting, because yeah, this was a good episode, and for me a lot of things kind of fell into place with this episode, but that's a wee bit complicated, so I'm going to leave the major thing I worked out till near the end. But on the whole, it was a good episode, not at least of all because it brought back the Man in Black. Yeah, I mean, William came back into the show, and I remember I said like the other week that I didn't think he was going to be back, that they probably just written him out completely. And yeah, they did. And not only is he not just in some crazy torture place, it's genuinely some kind of proper mental hospital, albeit a kind of unorthodox one. And as I said, probably the same one that Serac put his shonky-brained brother in. But I also love that William's still both the completely acerbic and relentlessly callous character he's always been, with Ed Harris making sure that you still kind of feel for him. I mean, even down to him genuinely like copping to his daughter's death when he's all teary-eyed, and how he has to live with it. But I think the real sneak of this storyline wasn't that he found some kind of new path or he's really faced up to things. It's also that he hasn't faced up to things. Because the episode kind of teased us with this relatable but trite, oh, he was a nice kid and his dad was nasty and a drunk and probably beat him up. But then it snatches that away with his various kind of versions arguing, and it turns out that maybe he was actually a bad kid. Maybe his dad was actually a nice guy who only drank because he didn't really know how to deal with his errant, vicious son. And it was also really good to see Peter Millen again, and also Jimmy Simpson as the younger sort of version of William, although I suspect that might be his only appearance this season, even if it was being beaten senseless by Ed Harris. But I'm kind of glad that they didn't forget the character or leave him gone for the entire rest of the season. As I said, Ed Harris is a fantastic actor, he's been in some amazing films, so it's really great to actually see him in his awesome craggy face, and I'm glad that he's crewing up with Team Stubnard for the last couple of episodes of the season. Although we know he's got this implant now, and I'm pretty sure that'll be important later on, otherwise they wouldn't have bothered showing it. But it was also really good fun to get back to Warworld with Maeve. And there was kind of a resonance between William smashing the heck pants out of all of his other selves and Maeve taking down the Nazis at the start. At least that's kind of how I read into it, and it was the good thing I read into that. And it's good to know that Maeve's still on track and, you know, she's getting some buddies back with her. Although I'm not surprised that they kept it secret who's coming back. I mean, I counted at least 4 pearls, so that would make sense because Dolores got out with 4, so 4v4 is a pretty good matchup, plus obviously Dolores and Maeve themselves, so that's 5 on 5. And now both teams are down 1 player because Chib's Dolores got killed and now they killed Hector. R.I.P. Hector. And that's kind of a shame actually, because Hector's never really had a character that got a chance to actually stretch really. He's always just been kind of the pretty muscle, and that's it. And the show never really developed him. It never really had the time or the sense to actually write him out in another way. But I'm glad they kind of gave him a bit of a, not a heroic death, it was a bit Matrixy, but yeah, I mean, he's been in it for 3 seasons, and somebody had to die to show the stakes, and he's a known face. And I do feel sorry because Rodrigo Santiago can't seem to get a break in TV shows. He always dies horribly, but at least this time he wasn't buried alive by mistake. Ugh, that still gives me the creeps. But yeah, it was also fun to see Dolores back in the naked chair room thing, because it was a total throwback to the first season, even if the wig didn't quite look right. And I'm also glad that they made an attempt to give the Hale-Ores story some weight and make her growing sense of being attached to the family pay off a wee bit. And it did, kind of. I mean, I was just starting to think, okay, let's see where this family shtick goes, when, oh dear, I hadn't expected that. And I genuinely didn't expect that. And I was surprised at first when she crawled out of the wreckage, but then I remembered the security guide had said this earlier on.
He wants her alive!
Now, clearly the aim was never to kill her because, you know, I mean, I presume because Serac knows all this and he planned all this, or Robin Hemotep or whatever the computer's called, which I can't understand why they didn't give it a simple name. But as we see towards the end, his watch has shown the variances have returned to almost a total eclipse, which means, as far as I understand it on the show, that everything is proceeding according to the way it predicts. And also this nice wee touch where it kind of looked like an eye. I thought that was kind of cool. It kind of tickled me. But not everything this week did, unfortunately. I mean, there was some stuff that, you know, not so much a complaint, but kind of a bit of an eye roll moment, was like, for example, when Maeve's saying that she wanted help, you know, because I couldn't stop thinking of that line in Daredevil when, you know, he says,
I wanna fucking cost you.
Yeah, I mean, it just, for some reason, that just kind of, it made me laugh and it pulled me out a little bit. And sticking with Maeve, I mean, as fun as it was, what exactly was the point of all the Nazi killing stuff? I mean, other than just having shots of Maeve punching Nazis that you can put in trailers and promotional material. And also because everyone likes it when you beat up Nazis. And I know I mentioned there was a bit of a nice symmetry to the scene with that and the one with William later on, but really, the scene didn't have a lot of point to it. I mean, we know that she can essentially do anything. I mean, as Dolores says, she can control people with her mind. Or at least she could for some hosts when it suited the plot at the time. But here, I presume, these are just computer programs, so aren't they basically as alive as Sizemore or her? I mean, why does she want to randomly kill the ones just because they've been programmed to be Nazis? That didn't make any sense to me. And getting back to the problem with her mind control, it's a bit of an issue for this show because, see, a narrative thrives on whether an audience understands the stakes in a story. Like, a key point has been made this week: a host can kill another host permanently by destroying the brain pearl. So that's proper permadeath for them. And it's important that Hale made a backup of all the data, but technically there still may be a backup of everybody from the park in some form, at least up to some point, presumably just at the point the park shut down. But now we know that Hector, he's pretty much dead, so that stake's in place. Now, yeah, there might be a version of Hector on a hard drive somewhere, but we know that he is effectively dead for this story. We won't be seeing him again, at least I don't think so. However, Maeve's power is totally random. Just like how, Hale took about 3 bullets and suddenly started limping about and having issues, when we've seen before that that's totally arbitrary because it just doesn't seem to matter when it happens. And also, somehow she can sense that people behind her, like 200 yards, have popped out somewhere and they're going to shoot at her before they actually shoot. I mean, that's some top drawer self-awareness. She must have eyes on the back of her head. And if there's one aspect of the show that really bugs me, it's this. Which is why I kind of batter on about it almost every week. I mean, I don't mind if the robots are super skilled. Hell, I'm happy with them. I'd be happy if they were doing like gun kata, dodging bullets using maths and probability, like the guys in Equilibrium do, the clerics. That's a great movie. Oh, well, okay, it's a so bad it's good kind of movie, but you should check it out, definitely. But this week she gets shot about twice and suddenly she's got a big limp, and not only that, they make a big point of saying, don't kill her. It's like, mate, nobody has actually managed to kill a host yet. Like, even like the old ones, don't seem to die from body shots all the time. Even when the park was going weird. Even before the park was going weird, some people were surviving anything that happened to their body. It was like the milk guy, remember? Anyway, it ties into a larger problem when everyone being sort of a super being, which kind of makes it a little bit bonkers that there's at least 3 characters in the story who are just normal human people, at least as far as we know. How is Billy the half-hand, Broke Brain Caleb, and Serac the super genius supposed to have half a chance against these guys? I mean, these guys who can not only predict and outwit and outfight and outshoot everybody. I mean, it's getting to the point where everyone's saying, haha, but maybe I thought you were going to do that unpredicted and made allowances for it. I mean, we're moving into the kind of the Sherlock Holmes territory. And it's something that actually itself has become so ridiculous, it gets parodied all the time.
So predictable. Yet only half as predictable as you.
So I assume you saw this coming.
I assume you saw this coming.
Yeah, and I assume we both saw this coming. No, not this again.
And it's sad because the predicting itself is becoming predictable, even at the point where it feels like it's been used to excuse daft stuff. I mean, like how Serac knew that Hale was Hale, but somehow he doesn't know what she's actually doing, even though he was watching her, but then he wasn't. And he doesn't really know, and sometimes he does, but it might all be part of his master plan, it's just not clear. And then Dolores and Maeve are also predicting what everyone else is doing, so it just gets messy and dumb. And I presume at the end we'll get to who is predicting everything, whether it's Serac or Dolores. Now, it's not clear at this point who is actually planning everything out. Although I suspect it's Dolores, and her ace in the hole is going to be Bernard, but I'll get more onto that later on. Also, with the Hale story, I mean, that was just kind of rushed. I mean, a lot of things have been rushed, and I felt that, unfortunately, we didn't get quite the emotional payoff with this that we should have done, because frankly, we just never got more than the bare bones of her character. I mean, a few shots of her looking awkward at her laddie and her ex, and her killing a pedo and scratching her arms a little bit, I mean, that doesn't make a great character. We should have had an actual arc with scenes, and scenes that weren't just Tessa Thompson scowling in meetings or crying and scratching. I mean, I'll admit, I'm not the biggest fan of Tessa Thompson. She's a fair actress, I don't think she's any more than that. But she also can only work with the material that she's given, and I think it's been lacking. And now she's off being Crispy Critter Caleb. Well, actually, more on that later. They've even rushed things like her getting home and whatever conversation preceded them getting into the car. I mean, something along the lines of, Mummy, why do you have bullet holes in your arms and legs? And, that sort of conversation. I mean, sure, the kid looked traumatized. I'm not complaining about the acting. Everyone was acting pretty well in that. But it just, again, it felt like they were rushing through this. And I'm wondering if this is because they've only doing an 8-episode season. Maybe if they'd gone for 10 episodes, they actually would have had time to expand on this. But then again, there's only so much money in the world. And I was also surprised by her using a gas grenade. Partly just because Chibs blew himself up the other week. But couldn't Chibs have survived and used a gas grenade and done exactly the same thing? Or couldn't, Hale have blown herself up? I mean, again, it just seems convenient that she had that and the other one had the other thing. It was because they needed the Chibs of Dolores to go boom so that she could get plugged in and have a chat with Maeve and hammer home that everybody is a shade of grey. Nobody's really good or bad storyline. I mean, apart from Serac, he's presumably bad because he blew up a kid. I mean, assuming that was him that did that and not Dolores behind that. I mean, I'm just saying it could have been anybody. Also, kind of a minor point, but wasn't it awfully lucky that nobody saw this thing flash up on the screen because they wandered out the room at exactly the right time? Convenient. And wasn't it also lucky that the giant robot was stored on a shelf right beside all the other parts of it so that it could just join up from where it was sat? Convenient. But then again, if you didn't see like Chekhov's robot coming to rescue her like a mile away, I mean, do you even watch TV? They set that up so obviously like weeks ago. Phew. Okay, now that was an awful lot, but despite having these concerns, I have something slightly more important to get into. You see, I had a revelation about the stormy events in this episode, because it turns out that Westworld, as far as I'm concerned, is actually Shakespeare's The Tempest. It totally just dawned on me in this episode. Now, I mean, there have been some things leading up to this, but it all suddenly fell into place. Now, I'll not go into too crazy depth here, because I'm not any kind of Shakespeare scholar, and I'm not an English teacher or anything like that, so suffice to say, the basic plot of The Tempest is it's about a bunch of folk shipwrecked on an island, and when they're there, they all get split up into different groups. And some of them are good people, some of them are bad people, and some of them end up infighting, and some of them plot to murder different ones of the others. And at the top of it all is a wizard who managed to get them onto the island, and who's been plotting everything that happened, and literally has been manoeuvring everybody like pieces on a chessboard to get the right ending. And basically doing all the right things to ensure that his kid falls in love with one of the ones from the other side. And also, there's a character who's a horribly deformed and evil vengeful demon who hates the wizard. Now, I know for sure that I'm not the first person to draw a connection between The Tempest and Westworld before, and I'm sure there's probably somebody on Reddit or some other video channel reviewing this who's probably actually made this connection, and that's perfectly fine, but I don't read Reddit and I don't watch many other channels on this, and I've not actually seen any chat on Twitter about this, even basic Google searching this. All I found was an article about Season 2 and how that broadly fit the themes of The Tempest, and I totally agree. And when it clicked, you see, it suddenly occurred to me, it's kind of like how Sons of Anarchy is really the story of Hamlet. Because if you ever watched Sons of Anarchy, it's just that. It's Hamlet stretched out and refitted about a biker gang instead of the Royal Palace of Denmark. On top of that, they had characters who stood in for all of the main characters in Hamlet. And they basically followed most of the major plot beats of the play, sometimes in the wrong order, sometimes in more than once in slightly different ways throughout the series. And I think in the same way, Westworld is The Tempest. And I think it actually has been right from the start. Because if you think about it that way, in Season 1, Ford was Prospero, the wizard, and Dolores was kind of like his daughter Miranda, and Bernard was sort of like Ariel, and Maeve was Caliban. In Season 2, Dolores became Caliban, Bernard became Alonso, and he was all about forgiving Prospero. And now in Season 3, we've now got a new Prospero in Serac, and now in the world that he's steering them all around. Dolores has now actually become Ferdinand, and Caleb is Miranda, falling in love with him. And then Hale has just become Caliban after being burnt horribly and wanting vengeance. And also kind of in a way so is William, which kind of fits perfectly, as Stubbs and Bernard are kind of like Trinculo and Stefano. And also at the same time, they're also kind of like Sebastian and Antonio. So, I mean, that also leaves Maeve as Ariel, the fairy who's enthralled to Prospero under a promise of being freed at the end of everything. I mean, are you with me so far? I mean, if not, and you don't know any about Shakespeare, then I'm sorry, because The Tempest is kind of complicated. There's actually a really good film version of it, came out about the year 2000. You should totally check it out. It's got an all-star cast. It's actually pretty good. And it's also interesting to follow like the Shakespeare reference through. And if you think about it, William is kind of also King Lear at this point. I mean, it's like King Lear waking up from like all the nonsense about 3/4 of the way through the play, and now he's about to head off into the final tragedy. And where does that leave us? Well, it's kind of hard to say, because The Tempest, as I said, is a weird play, and it ends with a sort of happy ending where nobody really dies and nothing is also really resolved that much. Everyone kind of gets to go home, but there's still a lot of bad things in the air and still a lot of weird characters who haven't met their just desserts for what went on. But ultimately, it's a play kind of about tolerance and the value of forgiveness over vengeance. And while I'd like to see that being the ultimate ending of Westworld, I can't really see it working out that way, not really for anybody. But I mean, who knows? There's only 2 episodes left this season, and after that, who knows how many more years, or even if the show will just get cancelled at the end of the season. I mean, it might be, they've not actually said if Season 4 is going to happen, and with Corona and everything else that's going on, who knows? But I'm still theorising that this season is going to end with like some kind of Terminator-esque thermonuclear apocalypse, and then the final season of it will be with some kind of futuristic Terminator Planet of the Apes thing. Now, I could be totally wrong about that, but that's my theory. So till next time, I've been Ian, and these have been my grumpy opinions. And a final wee shout out to my wee pal Michelle Forbes, top tier patron and all round awesome sauce person. And I want everybody to take care, stay safe, stay healthy, stay indoors, and I'll catch you all soon. Bye bye.